ATV gets a new investor. Severe flooding hits eastern Japan. And election fever grips Singapore.
Good evening. A mainland firm has bought a 41% stake in troubled broadcaster ATV, which has indicated it will seek a new free-to-air TV license. But as Owen Fung reports, the station's woes are still far from over.
A bit of good news for the broadcaster, whose free TV license expires in a little more than 6 months. ATV announced today that China Culture Media International Holdings Limited, a subsidiary of mainland conglomerate Sino Group, has acquired a 41.66% stake from major shareholder Wong Ben-kun. As for the remaining 10.75% stake that Wong holds and was ordered to sell by the court earlier, ATV says it will make an announcement on that at an appropriate time. ATV is hopeful the arrival of a new investor would help rejuvenate the station. Executive Director Ip Karpo says China Culture Media International will invest $5.1 billion over the next 6 years and plans to run 8 channels. Ip also said ATV plans to apply again for a free TV license. And he had this to say on how it compares with other channels also seeking a license.
We have our archive, we have our news footage and our drama and infotainment series. I think that some of the new apply for the TV, for the free TV, I don't think that they have our established.
Ip also dismissed concerns about editorial independence, saying the new mainland shareholder will not interfere with ATV's news operations. In response to the latest developments, the Communications Authority says it has received and is currently processing ATV's application for a change in shareholder. But late pay has once again dogged the station. About 20% of its employees have not been paid their August salaries. The Labour Department says it's monitoring the situation. A court hearing will be held next month. ATV, for its part, says the new investor has promised to resolve the problem as soon as possible. Owen Fung, TVB News.
The grandmother of the 12-year-old mainland boy who lived in Hong Kong illegally for years until recently has reportedly been charged by the Immigration Department. She's accused of aiding and abetting her grandson to contravene his conditions of stay. Emily Leung reports.
Chow Siu-xuan has been at the center of attention after it was revealed earlier this year that her grandson, mainland-born Siu Yao-wai, has stayed in Hong Kong illegally for the past 9 years. Chow later took her grandson back to the mainland, and she has been under investigation. Today, she reported to the Immigration Department in Kowloon Bay. She told the media that she is not afraid to be charged for having kept her grandson illegally here. The grandmother was later driven by officials to the Immigration Prosecution Office on Ma Tau Kok Road. She left after about an hour. Sources say immigration officials filed charges against Chow after consulting the Department of Justice. The charges are said to be aiding and abetting someone to contravene his conditions of stay. The Immigration Department refused to comment on the case, citing ongoing legal proceedings. As for Chow's grandson, he's believed to be back on the mainland and being looked after by relatives. Their grandmother and grandson surrendered to authorities in May this year. At the time, Chow claimed the boy's parents abandoned him on the mainland, so she kept him under her care illegally in Hong Kong. Chow says she hoped turning her grandson in will allow him to have a better life in Hong Kong. However, in June, the grandson returned to the mainland, having sought voluntary repatriation. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
Premier Li Keqiang says China is on track to meet all of its economic targets, insisting the country has strong foundations to grow and tackle challenges. But data for August painted a sobering picture of China's manufacturing output, suggesting an economic slowdown is underway, which would have profound implications for the global economy.
Tumbling domestic equity markets, massive foreign exchange reserve sell-offs as part of elaborate moves to devalue the yuan, plus a slowing economy overall, it's been quite a few months for China. But today, Premier Li Keqiang was on hand to assure delegates at the World Economic Forum that all was fine. Despite the summer turmoil, Li said China was still on track to meet all of its economic targets for the year. He said China was shock-resistant and resilient, adding the country wasn't a source of risk, but an engine of growth for the world economy. Li pledged China would not engage in a currency war despite the recent devaluation of the yuan, and promised continued economic and financial reforms. This, he said, includes plans to allow overseas central banks into the domestic market for foreign exchange trading. Still, his comments come amid concerns about China's ability to handle any slowdown, despite Li's promise there would be no hard landing. Data for August showed that manufacturers cut prices at the fastest rate in 6 years. The producer price index fell 5.9% from the same period last year. Consumer prices rose 2% in the same period, but that was due to rising food prices rather than an increase in economic output. Indeed, the head of New Zealand's central bank believes China's economy is growing at a rate of around 5 to 6.5%, rather than at 7% as projected by Beijing. Central banks around the world are concerned about the impact of falling Chinese prices and a weaker yuan on their economies.
Norway has confirmed that Islamic State militants are holding a Norwegian man in his 40s in captivity. The group also claims to be holding a 50-year-old Chinese man. The foreign ministry in Beijing says it's verifying this claim. The extremist group posted pictures of the two men in the latest issue of its online magazine. The magazine lists a telegram number for whoever would like to pay the ransom for their release and transfer. Norway's prime minister says Norway does not pay ransom, but it is working to free its citizen. Islamic State controls large parts of Iraq and Syria and has killed several captives in gruesome videos online.
Heavy rain is pounding Japan for a second straight day, flooding hundreds of homes and unleashing landslides. Japanese military helicopters plucked dozens of residents from the tops of their homes today. But rescue officials say they can't keep up with the requests for help. Raging floodwaters swamped parts of a city north of Tokyo. There were no immediate reports of deaths or injuries, but at least 2 people are missing.
The people of Singapore go to the polls tomorrow to vote in the country's parliamentary election. As James Aiken reports, growing concerns about social issues are creating the biggest ever election challenge for the Lion City's ruling party.
Singapore has been ruled by one party since it won independence from Malaysia 50 years ago. Under the watch of the People's Action Party and its founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore has risen from obscurity to a global trade and financial center. But Singapore's growth is also posing big challenges on social issues like immigration, the cost of living, growing income disparity, and transportation. In Singapore's last election in 2011, the PAP won the vast majority of parliamentary seats, but the party's candidates watched their share of the vote drop to just over 60%, its lowest ever.
PAP may look dominant, but it can easily lose. It can very easily lose. People don't realize, outside observers, it takes only about 10,000 votes to swing, and you lose in a constituency.
For the first time, the main opposition Workers' Party will field candidates in all 89 parliamentary seats.
They say the rising tide lifts all boats, but this is more like flash flooding of the labor force, depressing wage growth and pushing up cost of living. Many Singaporeans have been thrown overboard by the flood and are treading water just to keep alive.
So I think that for the PAP, they're very conscious that they need to stop this decline in electoral support. And for the opposition parties, I think there is a sense that this is as good a time, to make further inroads, to move Singapore towards whether it's a two-party or multi-party system, but certainly the idea that there is now greater political pluralism.
Despite being generally happy with the government's performance, voters say they want to keep the ruling party in check.
Maybe they, just don't want them to be complacent, and probably, sometimes they need to take a step back and then really look at, things from a different perspective.
Voters will cast their ballots on Friday in the most keenly contested election in Singapore's history. James Aiken, TVB News.
And still ahead in our news, more tough talk by Hungary on migrants. Locally, new twist to controversy over gray goods trading. And Roger Federer continues to roll in the U.S. Open.
They may have been born with silver spoons in their mouths and had the best starts in life. But they've also had to work hard to keep their family name well respected. Wednesday, Tissot Chemin d'Etoile collection presents Tycoon Talk and the Next Generation at 9 on Pearl.
By the light of the silvery moon, brightly in blue, sing a lovely tune. By the silvery moon, by the silvery moon.
奇華至尊月餅。放孔明燈之前，許個願先啦。
我希望世界和平。
喂，千祈唔好放啊！
點解啊？
孔明燈放咗上天，唔知會飛去邊，可能會危害航空安全。跌落嚟嘅時候，隨時會引起火警，包括山火，仲可能會整親人添。
邊有咁易啊？
試過㗎啦，你都唔想有意外㗎。
咁危險，都係唔好玩喎。
Open your eyes to a world full of wonder.
There it is, all of Jamestown packed into one little valley. This is amazing.
If I don't cleanse my soul this time around, it's never gonna happen. Hooray!
Friday, Globe Trekker, Season 17 at 8 on Pearl.
And welcome back to TVB News. European Union ministers are preparing for a key meeting next week that will focus on improving Europe's response to the migrant crisis. But sharp differences remain over what to do about the situation. James Aiken reports.
Refugees from Syria, Somalia, Iraq and Afghanistan board a train for Western Europe in Hungary. They hope it's the last leg of their harrowing journeys.
From Turkey to Greece, a forest, 6 hours running, a river. We cross the river by a plastic boat. And from Serbia to Hungary, also a forest. And spiky wires, we cross from under the spiky wires.
It was like 25 person, and the boat was so small. So when we move, oh my gosh, I say absolutely we are all going to die.
Hungary has become a key transit point for tens of thousands of refugees flooding in from Serbia. A new 175-kilometer razor wire fence along the border is expected to seal the border within a few days. Hungarian police captured a record 3,321 migrants yesterday, the highest daily figure so far this year. The conservative government is promising tougher measures soon to defend its border. As Europe's migrant crisis spreads northwards, hundreds more people were stranded as Danish police temporarily closed highway and rail links with Germany in a bid to stem the flow of refugees to Sweden. The European Commission has announced plans for a more comprehensive response through a quota system. Ahead of a September 14th meeting of EU interior ministers, a top official is pressing to rebuild international solidarity.
This ongoing blame game will not move us even a step closer towards solving the migration crisis.
The European Commission has proposed that 120,000 additional asylum seekers should be shared among 28 EU members.